Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Charmed Season 1, Episode 3, Thank You for Not Morphing. Our episode in a nutshell is just a brief summary of exactly what happens within this episode. The new neighbors are shapeshifters who are after the Book of Shadows, and they try stealing it using Victor and the drama that he brings into the lives of the sisters. I'll now go into a more detailed summary, giving our opinions on each scene as we go. We begin the episode with the sisters leaving the manor in order to attend a neighbor's housewarming party, and Prue is reluctant to go as she has work the next day, saying that they're going to stay 20 minutes, and Piper tells her that they can't do a party in 20 minutes, while Prue tells her to watch her. Phoebe then jokes that these are Prue's party tips: meet, greet, and bail. As they leave, they pass a bush, and in the bush is a dog with glowing eyes, which watches them leave. They then arrive at the party and they greet the hosts, Cinda, Marshall, and Fritz, with Marshall leading the conversation, Cinda being a bit offish, and Fritz a little bit more of the mild-mannered one. They then, once they have greeted the host, rejoin the other guests in the party, and Prue indicates that she wants to leave right away, but Piper and Phoebe stop her. We then have it revealed that the reason that they stopped her is because they have invited Andy, who waves at her from across the room. Prue scolds them for interfering, as she has made it clear that witch and cop are not a love connection. Phoebe then tells her that it's boy-girl and to lighten up, before heading off into the crowd with Piper. Andy, of course, then makes his way over, and they banter a bit before he invites her to a Warriors game on that Saturday. She hesitates to say yes, saying that she needs to check her book because she might have a thing. Then Fritz gives her an out by interrupting, saying that he heard Andy was a cop. She corrects him that he's an inspector, and Fritz then asks about his parking tickets. Prue then makes her escape, heading back to the manor to find that the door is ajar. When she walks in, the same dog barks at her from the stairs, leading to her backing up before running out of the house. So here we get a bit of a issue with their relationship, and that in the end of the last episode, her and Andy were in a good place. She told him to call her, and now she's saying that witch and cop don't make a love connection. So we see obviously something off screen has changed with their relationship, but we as the audience are not really told what. The next day, as they all gather in the kitchen, Prue tells Phoebe and Piper about the dog that broke in, indicating that it had left scratches at the attic door, and then she accuses Phoebe of leaving the door open. Phoebe, of course, is asking her why she's not blaming Piper, who claims that it wasn't her. Then they decide that the dog needs to have an owner, though Phoebe confirms that nothing was taken before she suggests a security system. But Prue claims that a security system would be too expensive, but assures them that Andy is going to be checking on them after what happened, which excites her sisters, who are in Andy's corner, that she told them what was happening. Phoebe asks what they should do, since they can't afford a security system. And Prue says that they can either rely on their vicious guard cat, or they can remember to lock the doors. Phoebe says that that's a very good idea, as Prue leaves the room, and then she locks the utility room door behind Prue, leaving Prue to have to knock to try to get back in, while Piper just watches on amused. Obviously, again, we get that sibling dynamic, Phoebe pulling the prank on Prue, locking the door behind her because she's been accused of leaving the doors open when she claims it wasn't her. And also, it's just like a simple daily life sort of exposition scene where we get an update on where the sisters are. And these are always some of my favorite scenes because they're just, like I said, little daily life snippets, and those are always fun to see. We then join Prue, who's at Buckland's in her office doing her job, When Victor approaches her through her open office door in order to ask her to authenticate his ring, she suggests that there is an appraiser that works for the auction house, but he tells her that the appraiser would need a week and he needs it done quicker than that. Prue decides to help him and pulls out some reference materials in order to authenticate the ring. She notes that it looks like a wedding band meant to provide protection against magic. As she looks at the ring, you can kind of see the gears turning, and then she seems to have a realization and asks what his name is to confirm. He then tells her that she already knows, calling her Prudence. She immediately turns aggressive and tells him to get out and stay away from them as he casually stands, putting the ring back onto his finger. He then tells her which hotel he's staying at and asks that all of the sisters join him for dinner in order to talk and catch up. She tells him how dare he after abandoning them, and she would never abandon her duties to her family. He says he can see that they have some issues to work through, and she again tells him to get out, this time adding, before he's thrown out. He asks if that's any way to talk to her father before acquiescing and leaving the room. I'll admit, it's rather an odd way to approach your estranged daughter, but also he kind of picked the most difficult daughter to approach first. Prue is the one who is old enough to remember him leaving. She's the one most hurt by it. Phoebe, meanwhile, was just in New York trying to find him. So if he wanted to try to get that in to the sisters, he really would have been better served approaching Phoebe first rather than going after Prue first. And obviously, we now see as well, as was hinted in the first episode, that Prue is clearly very distressed and deeply hurt by the abandonment of her father in the past, and we can see that by her complete 180 in attitude when she realizes who he is. The sisters then gather together at a cafe, where Prue has informed them of their father's visit to her office. Piper wonders why he went to Prue first and not to either her or Phoebe, while Phoebe just wants to know if he asked about them. Prue informs her that he didn't ask about them and emphasizes the point that he abandoned them, and he was a 20-year no-show. Piper suggests that he wants to be part of their lives again, and Prue warns not to get her hopes up, while Phoebe is just saying that the only way that they can find out what he wants is to meet him, and she wants to go and meet him right away rather than wait until their dinner. Prue again stresses to her sisters that it's suspicious that he shows up just after they've become witches. But he didn't even bother to come to their mother's funeral when their mom died. Phoebe then tells Prue that he did send them birthday cards, and Prue reminds them that Grams had always said that he was a threat. Piper rejoins again with Prue, saying getting to know him, but them being too young and wanting to have the chance to know him now. Prue again reminds them that they don't know why he's there, and until they do, they cannot trust him. Obviously, in this case, we once again see as the oldest that Prue's the one who is most hurt by the abandonment, but she also, because of that hurt, now is able to take a more logical view and kind of think about why Victor is there. Whereas in the case of Phoebe and Piper, because they were so young, they have a more idealized image, and they just want to be able to get to know him as they never had that opportunity. So they're letting their emotions lead them versus Prue, who is more taking that step back and taking that more logical approach, which also is in line with her character's personality as well. We then join Phoebe at the hotel where she's decided to visit Victor on her own without telling her sisters. She knocks on the door and she's told to come in, and then she faces Victor, who is currently getting a massage. Once he notices her, he then stops the massage in order to greet her, but misidentifies her as Piper at first. before then correcting that she must be Phoebe. Phoebe, to cover for him, pretends that people confuse them all the time. He then offers her food and drink, but she declines, saying that she doesn't want anything, just to look at him. And he says that she has his eyes before they share an awkward hug. As they hug, she then gets a premonition of Victor taking the Book of Shadows. And then luckily the phone rings, and she uses the opportunity to make her escape, saying that she has to go and will see him at dinner. He calls for her to wait, but she doesn't and continues to leave. Obviously, as I noted, this is a very awkward meeting. It's very clear that Phoebe went there without any sort of plan or an idea of what to say or what to do once she had actually arrived there. It's also a little odd to me that he would call somebody into his room that he doesn't know who's on the he doesn't know who's on the other side of the door, and yet he's like she knocks and he's like, "Come in," and he's like half naked while he's getting a massage. I feel like that's an odd thing to do. I feel like if you were getting a massage, you'd say, "Come back later," or you'd maybe get up, get dressed, or you'd say like, "Wait a minute," and then get up, get dressed, and then answer the door because you don't know who's on the other side. Also probably awkward for Phoebe, first time she sees her dad in her memory because he left when she was so young, and he's half naked getting a massage. It's weird. But also because it was so awkward, because they didn't really have anything to say to each other, she didn't have any plan really or goal in going there apart from it being a plot device in order to give Phoebe the premonition of him stealing the Book of Shadows. It's kind of like a wasted scene. But not entirely wasted because it does have the premonition, which then allows us to set up for the other scenes in the episode. We next watch a mailman walk up to the manor doors. He looks around, making sure that nobody is watching him before changing one of his fingers into the shape of a key, which he then uses to unlock the door and enter inside. He heads straight up to the attic door, which, no matter how hard he tries or struggles, won't open for him. So he ends up kicking it and then heading directly, once he's in the attic, for the Book of Shadows. He grabs the book, but once he reaches the door, the front door. So he grabs the book, goes back downstairs, heading out the front door. But the book magically prevents him from taking it out of the manor. It glows, it then flies out of his hands, and then he tries again and again, and he fails to take it out several times. And then eventually he does hear a car door closing outside, which indicates that someone has come home. He then tosses the book into the living room before shifting into the appearance of Andy. And this is who Prue sees as she comes inside. She asks Andy what he's doing there, and he claims that he came to check up, but then he saw that the door was open, so he came in, but upon looking, everything seems fine. He then asks if she wants him to look upstairs, but Prue says that it's fine, before she notices that the book is now in the living room. She then uses her powers to hide the book under the couch, and tells Andy that she's changed her mind about the game, which of course confuses the imposter who wasn't part of that conversation, before then going on to tell him about Victor showing up and wanting to avoid having dinner together. This is when Cinda shows up at the door asking if everything's all right, opening it up, peeking her head in, before then leaving. And the imposter Andy then says he'd better get going too. He leaves. Prue locks the door behind them before retrieving the book and then bringing it back upstairs and finding the broken attic door. So as an audience member, I always appreciate when a show shows us rather than tells us important information. As much as I enjoy a lot of the dialogue in the show and the back and forth between the sisters and the other people that they communicate with, too much talking can unfortunately end up being a little bit on the boring side. You get bored watching people just sitting around talking, and so when they are able to show you instead of just telling you, I, as an audience member, really appreciate it. And I think that in this scene, it was a great way to show us the powers of the villains without having to sit there and tell us about it. They've shown us that Finger turned into a key, then he's morphed into Andy. This is also the first time that we see the book being able to defend itself against evil, so we again get a new little piece of information. However, I do have one little criticism, not even a criticism, more of an observation. But obviously they went to a housewarming party at the start, which indicates that these neighbors are new. They don't have a history. They're not super close. They were invited because they live on the same street. They did greet the hosts, but again, it didn't really seem that they were overly close or friendly. And yet Cinda, with absolutely no reason to believe anything is wrong, walks up to their house, opens the door without knocking, peeks her head in, and asks, "Hey, is everything all right?" And of course, we know that this is to save her shape-shifting buddy to get him out. But it's weird to me that it didn't raise any alarm bells for Prue that this random person who's just moved in is now opening their door without knocking and then asking if everything's all right when there's really no reason for her to suspect anything could be wrong, as nothing is happening outside of the house. I feel like that was a bit of an oversight. I understand why, like again, I understand why it's there for plot reasons to give the other shifter a chance to escape. But from like just like if this was reality, the suspension of disbelief aspect, it's an odd thing to do, and it's odd that it didn't raise alarm bells with Prue. We then have the sisters all gathering together again so that Prue can tell Piper and Phoebe about the attempted theft of the Book of Shadows. Phoebe inquires why anyone would want to steal the Book of Shadows, with Prue stating that there could only possibly be one reason. They know what it can do, and they want its power, which is to say that they want their power. Piper points out that that would mean that someone knows about them being witches, and then Prue immediately points the finger at Victor due to the timing of his arrival. Obviously, he's their dad, who's married to their mother, who was a witch, so probably knows. Piper, however, points out that the magic is passed through the female line, so there is the possibility that he doesn't know that they're charmed. But again, he was married to their mother, a witch, so there's obviously, and Prue points it out, a good chance that he does know that they're witches. Phoebe obviously goes through a bit of an internal struggle on whether or not to reveal her premonition. She then flashes back to seeing Victor taking the book. Piper then appeals to Phoebe to agree with her, and Phoebe says that if he was after it, why would he have left it behind all those years ago when he abandons them? Piper then says that they should report the break-in, but Prue points out that they wouldn't know what to say, but then reveals that Andy was there, which Phoebe latches onto and asks if Prue ever thought of pointing the finger at him. And Prue just says that he was probably the one who scared Victor away. Prue then suggests that they hide the book, or that they stay in the house with the book, and of course both Piper and Phoebe agree on hiding the book as they both want to go to dinner with Victor, while Prue says that she's already seen him and decides to stay home. Again, we have Prue taking the more logical view regarding the situation. Though, on the same note, it is a bit odd that she wouldn't be suspicious of Andy just randomly being inside of the house. Additionally, obviously this wasn't actually Andy, so his car wouldn't have been out front. I'm sure by now, after they've been dating, that she knows what his car looks like. So she wouldn't have seen his car, then she walks in and suddenly he's there. I feel like even though Andy is somebody that she trusts, Andy is aware of their break-in attempt previously, that it still would have maybe not been super suspicious, but I feel like it would have still given somebody pause to kind of think about it, like second guess why they might be there. And then it also reinforces the idea of the hold the dad has on Phoebe, because even with her vision, which shows him taking the book, she's still not really willing to take a hard stance against Victor or Andy, kind of stays off into the side. She also chooses not to tell her sisters And apart from her wanting to protect their dad or him still having some sort of hold on her emotionally, there's no reason that she wouldn't. In a fancy-looking restaurant, Piper and Phoebe are going to dinner with Victor, who decides to reminisce about Piper when she was young, only eating white foods, and she says that she was 4 at the time. And Phoebe, even though she was 1 and couldn't walk, she could apparently swim. He says that it feels right and natural to be there together. And Piper tries to ask him why he's there, why now, but he deflects, saying that it's a restaurant and it's dinner time, which is when the food comes and is laid in front of Phoebe, and the question remains unanswered. I personally wouldn't have said that the dinner was natural or right, as it came off very awkward. But that is also expected given the passage of time, the fact that he abandoned them. The last time he saw these two sisters is indicated to be when Piper was 4 and Phoebe was only 1 year old. So the awkwardness is to be expected in this case, and I also don't really like that the question remained unanswered, but I also understand that that's probably to build up the tension in the scene so that the big reveal can come later. So Prue, of course, has decided to remain home and not go to dinner with her father. And she's making a bowl of broccoli leftovers in the fridge. And she pours the broccoli from the Tupperware container onto a plate when the doorbell rings. Andy says that his plans for the night fell through and he figured he might as well stop by. Prue then brings him into the kitchen and again complains about Victor showing up at her work, and he says that he can't believe it, asking how she's dealing with it. And of course, she says that she's not dealing with it. He asks her what Victor wants, and she reveals that Piper and Phoebe are at dinner with him, but that she had decided to stay. And then she starts complaining about how they don't understand, as they don't know him like she does, unable to believe that they went or that she even let them go to have dinner with Victor. She mentions that Victor's been acting like no time has passed and she's still his little girl, but she knows that she isn't. She then talks about what she wishes that she could tell him, going over the past events, like when she broke her, like going over how he missed past events, like when she broke her arm, missing prom, etc., etc. She says that she wants him to know, and that she wants him to want to know, and that she wants to get answers about where he's been, and that it wasn't okay that he left. Andy then says that she needs to tell him before offering to drop her off. Obviously, Prue has horrible taste in food. It's literally a Tupperware container full of broccoli, and that's what she's decided she's going to have for dinner. And then, in addition to that, she's wasting dishes because she has a perfectly good Tupperware container she could eat out of because it's just broccoli, and then she puts it on a plate. I had to call that out. Obviously, this is a scene where we see a nice heart-to-heart moment with Andy, and Andy having that sort of understanding that her sisters were lacking because he's not impacted by the emotions the same way her sisters are, but also figuring out that Prue has a lot of issues she needs to work through, and it's probably the better idea that she works through these with Victor in person, and so he offers to drive her there. But also, she mentioned her dad to the imposter, and I can understand because the imposter left so quickly that she then told Andy again about her father. But was there no suspicion at any point when she was like I told you earlier, or anything like that? Or did she not even approach it that way? Because I feel like there'd be alarm bells if somebody was telling you about something that they thought they had told you earlier, that would kind of stand out, and you'd be like, you didn't tell me that. And it's almost like a repetitive conversation, only this time instead of making a quick exit, he's actually listening because this is the real Andy. But I felt like, again, in reality, you would think that there would be some sort of alarm bell going off saying, why are they talking to me like they've already told me part of the story and they're picking up in the middle? Or if you didn't pick up in the middle, why would you then be telling somebody the same story straight from the beginning instead of picking up where you left off? Either way, I find that in reality there probably would have been alarm bells, but I do again want to say that I do appreciate that in this case Andy is sensitive to Prue's needs and realizes that he's not the one she should be talking to, offering to give her a ride to visit Victor and her sisters. Prue gets her ride off screen and crashes the dinner between Victor, Piper, and Phoebe, and she enters ready for battle. As soon as she arrives at the table, she doesn't sit down but begins interrogating Victor after he's greeted her about where he's been. If he had the money for all of this, why not help out when Grams died, etc., etc. Piper, of course, jumps in and says that he's already explained that off screen and that the money is new, but Victor tells Piper that it's okay, saying that he didn't come earlier afraid of disappointing her, but she replies that it's too late, she's already been disappointed. Piper then awkwardly tries to bring up dessert, trying to keep the peace, while Victor asks Prue to join them, but she says that she isn't hungry. He then mentions how this is so like Prue, and mentions how she skipped crawling and went straight to walking, but she rejects the reminiscing because the one that she has is of his back walking out the door. A waiter then brings out dessert, and Victor intentionally trips him, leading to Piper panicking and freezing the restaurant. She then gets up, goes around the table, and grabs the dessert, asking who wants flambe. But now she's on the other side of the table when everything unfreezes. So Victor then compliments Piper's reflexes and reveals that he does in fact know about their powers, naming each of them, before suggesting that they leave and talk elsewhere. Honestly, with Prue, she was supposed to go in there and talk things through. She went in there ready for battle, immediately confrontational. And if she just wanted to yell at him, if she just wanted to have this big confrontation, I feel like she could have also, rather than going into a public place and making a scene and interrupting what could be a lovely dinner for Piper and Phoebe, maybe have waited and confronted him at his hotel either before the dinner or after the dinner, rather than making the scene public. But of course, they needed an excuse in order to reveal their powers so that they can reveal that Victor knows, so that they can then change locations. So we understand why she went in and made a public scene. But in my opinion, it's always better if you're going to have a big blowout, unless you suspect you'd be in danger otherwise. Do that behind closed doors because the public really doesn't know or care about your drama and we really don't need to see it. We then return to the manor where Phoebe and Piper are seemingly reading in the living room, while the mailman comes in saying that they need to leave because the sisters are heading back. The mailman then shifts back into Fritz, while Piper and Phoebe shift into Marshall and Cinda. As they argue about their failed plan to trick Prue into getting the book out of the house, as what they had originally wanted to do is they thought she was on a date with Andy. They thought when she got back from her date, they would then pretend to be Phoebe and Piper and convince her somehow to get the book out of the house. Obviously, this plan failed, and Fritz asks, "What now?" And Cinda shifts again into a demonic form, saying that they kill them. Outside, the sisters are seen getting out of their car. Marshall tells Cinda to heal, saying that there'll be plenty of time for that later. Then, when the sisters and Victor do enter the house, there are three black birds that then fly past them. I do question why Cinda was the only one with a demonic form. And given that they're shapeshifters, does it even matter that she had a demonic form, since they can literally look like anything and at any time, even inanimate objects, as they proved with the finger turning into a key? But again, this is just a little quick check-in with the villains, and that's basically the point of the scene, it seems. Prue comes back into the living room after finding a window open, letting the others know that that's most likely how the birds had gotten in, to find that the others are all laughing together. And then she asks what's so funny. Piper brings her a picture of a family picnic gone wrong that they were reminiscing about, but she claims to barely remember it. Victor then looks at another picture of a piano recital, then one where he was cut out. Phoebe says that it was Grams who cut him out of the picture, and then Piper mentions the stuff that Grams left in the attic, and Phoebe mentions that's not all she left, despite Prue trying to stop her from talking. But Phoebe doesn't take the hint, plows right on, saying that he already knows, and that it's a relief to talk about it. Piper, realizing that there is going to be some conflict between Phoebe and Prue, awkwardly offers to get coffee. Phoebe then continues, as we all knew she would, to say that her power is uncool. Victor says that her mom thought that premonitions were the most desirable power, but Phoebe says that unless you see things that would be true, unless you see things that you don't desire. Prue asks how long he's known about them, and he said he didn't know about the fact that they had gotten their powers yet, but he knew that there was a possibility, and that's why he came back, so that he could find out. He also then mentions the book, asking to take a look as he hasn't seen it in years. Phoebe, of course, has always been, from day one, the most excited about their powers, the most excited to be special, and in this scene as well, she's super excited to just open up and tell him everything about them and their powers. In my summary, I, of course, gave the gist of the conversation, but Phoebe went on and on about the powers. And even as an audience member, you're like, even if he knows about the powers, he obviously doesn't have them himself. And I think you're just a little bit too comfortable and a little bit too excited. But I do think it is a nice family moment when they're reminiscing over the pictures. We learn a little bit more about the history, like, for example, the fact that Prue apparently used to be able to play the piano. I don't think that comes up again in the series, but it's a fun little tidbit. We then rejoin our villains in their own house where Cinda is destroying a lot of their furniture, claiming that she's disappointed. Marshall tells her that they need to be patient, but she claims that they could have destroyed them. He then reminds her that they would then have 3 dead witches and no way to get the book out of the house, and asks where that would have gotten them. She claims at least they would have been satisfied. Fritz jumps in with the idea to kill 2 of them and force the third to get the book out. Marshall then stresses that they aren't dealing with schoolgirls, but good witches, and they can't alert them to their presence, as battling them when they're at their full strength would be unpleasant. But once they have the book, they'll get stronger, the sisters will get weaker, and therefore then become easy prey. Fritz says that it's a good theory, but they've already tried everything. Marshall then says that they still have one thing to try before mentioning Victor. Obviously, this is where we get an insight into the next plan of our villains, having known that their previous plans have failed multiple times. And we also get a sneak peek into their desire to use Victor against the sisters. Back in the manor with everybody, Victor asks Prue what she's accusing him of. Clearly, things turned south after he asked to see the book. Phoebe and Piper try to calm Prue down, but Prue says that they aren't thinking straight or seeing clearly, as he's wined and dined them. She then points out that he's managed to get back into a house that he hasn't been in 20 years, and now the first thing that he wants to do is see the Book of Shadows. Phoebe then says that she's looking for something to blame him for, and Prue tells Victor to admit it and tell them why he's there. Piper tries to play mediator, tries to stop and calm everything down, but Prue again appeals to Victor, telling him to, for once in his life, tell them the truth. He then admits that the book is the reason that he came back, but adding that it's not for the reason that Prue is thinking. pointing out that it would make it easy for Prue to think that he was evil. But he isn't evil, and he came back to protect them. Piper asks him what he thinks he's protecting them from, while Prue, of course, is sitting there not believing a word that he says. He says that he came back to protect them from himself, from themselves, wanting to end the power of three. Phoebe says that the power of three is a part of them, but he tells her that that's what his mother said too, before they, that is to say evil, killed her. Piper then asks what he means, and he tells her that they have no idea what kind of evil is out there. Prue, of course, always contrary, has to point out that they've got a pretty good idea. He warns that the book attracts evil, and as long as they have and use it, they will be in danger. Prue rejects his concern, saying that after so many years of absenteeism, he can't come back and tell them how to live their lives. He then tells them that against Grams, he fought for them. Grams wanted them to be witches. He didn't, but unfortunately, Grams was stronger. Piper then steps in, again angry that he is blaming Grams. So now Piper has switched over to Prue's side because Grams is the one who raised them. Grams is the one who loved them. He then tries to appeal to them again, saying that he just wants what's best for them. Prue, of course, says that she's not him, and she's not going to abandon her family or her duties. He then asks if she can protect her sisters forever. Phoebe steps in, now also on Prue's side, saying that they are going to protect each other. He then tells them that they're going to die together then. And Prue, once again trying to hit where it hurts, says that no one can hurt them as bad as he did, before she then uses her powers to push him away. He reels back, falls into the wall, and then when he gets up, he says that if she wanted him to leave, all she had to do was ask. And then he leaves. Phoebe, at this point, now turns on Prue again and asks her if she really had to do that before leaving, and Piper agrees that they could have talked like normal people, but Prue points out that they aren't normal. Now, overall, we now find out Victor's goal, which has been hinted at since the start. We now have the sisters more so on the same page, at least with regards to Victor, but Piper and Phoebe are still showing a soft spot for Victor, having switched to Prue's side, but still thinking that maybe she's gone a little far and trying to kick him out. And then there was just one little thing that I noticed when Prue pushed her father away. Where he fell, if you were to go in a straight line, at least the way it looked on camera, it could have been different in reality, obviously, but the way it looked in camera is it looked like he would have had to phase through a chair that was kind of in the way between point A and point B. At least I remember that when I was watching it. I put it in my notes here. But of course, that was a minor thing. And then there's also the creed again. They brought it up in part one, so I'm going to keep going back to it because they seem to have completely forgotten the creed that they themselves set in this show. But the show is, and harm none, do what you will. Victor is immortal. Victor does not have, like, basically, mortal is the equivalent to muggle for the Charmed universe. And Victor is immortal. He is a regular human being. He does not have magic, even if he is aware of the magical world, thanks to having been married to a witch. And Prue just slammed, like, threw him across the room with her magic. I would say that's harm. Even though he did get up right away, he still slammed into the wall. He'll probably have some bruises. And I wonder again why she maybe doesn't get consequences for this. We've obviously learned that there's consequences for personal gain, but if you go against the creed and harm none, do what you will. If you are harming people, harming the innocents, the mortals who are not magical, is that not then against the creed? And would there not then be consequences of some sort for that? Obviously, the show doesn't have consequences for it, but just from an outside perspective, I wonder if maybe that should have been something that they considered when they were making the show. After being kicked out, Victor returns to his hotel and enters his room, sitting in a chair in the sitting area, when he happens to find that the shapeshifters are already there. He asks them how they got in, and Marshall says he should be concerned with what they're doing there, not how they got in there. Victor remains calm, saying that he wondered when evil would rear its ugly head, and Marshall says consider it reared, then says that he doesn't know who he usually deals with, but they probably aren't willing to rip him into 1,000 pieces and dance on his entrails. Victor then calls them lawyers, and here he was assuming they were shifters. Fritz says that those cocky words will make for an appetizer, and Victor counters that those are cocky words for a man who can't get a simple book out of a house. He then tells them that their plan to shift into him in order to get the book will fail because he was just kicked out by the sisters. But to save himself, he does note that he can reach one of them. He can reach Phoebe, but it would need to really be him, because only he, as her real father, would know the right buttons to push, making the case that they're going to need him. Obviously, clever thinking on Victor's part to save himself, though it does make him look a bit like the bad guy, and is kind of still moving on with that he could potentially be a villain vibe that the show's been trying to give us from the start. Also, he mentions that only as her real father would he be able to know what buttons to push for Phoebe. Has he forgotten the fact that the last time he saw her before this was when she was 1 year old? He doesn't know anything about Phoebe. But Phoebe definitely is the one who is most open to him, so if he can reach any of them, she is likely the one that he could reach. The next day, Prue and Piper are picking at their breakfast at the table when Phoebe comes in and decides that she needs to call a truce. She then, in the honor of that truce, confesses to her visit to see Victor on her own and also comes clean about the premonition that she saw, telling Prue that she was right and that she had hoped that there was a better explanation as she didn't want her premonition to be true. And she wanted Victor to be there for them and to be a part of their lives. Prue is understanding and says that she knows, and then they hug, reconciling. Piper finds Victor's protection ring on the floor, and that must have come off when he fell, read as Prue threw him into a wall. And Prue says that they'll send it to the hotel before putting it on the foyer table. Obviously, we're now getting a resolution to the conflict between the sisters. They're all on the same side about Victor. Phoebe's coming clean about her visit, her premonition, and also the reasons why she felt that it was appropriate to hold back that information when everybody was questioning and trying to figure out what Victor's motives were. And then we also get a little bit of foreshadowing with finding the ring and putting it on that particular foyer table or hallway table. After their conversation, Phoebe then goes outside to get the paper, waving to Fritz and Marshall, who are sitting on a car across the street, when Victor comes up behind her, telling her not to be afraid and that it's very important. She tells him to leave as she doesn't want to talk to him anymore, but he tells Phoebe that she needs to get the book from the house. She tries to push past him, but he grabs her arm, saying to trust him and telling her to look. Phoebe then gets the same premonition that she had before, but this time it continues on a little bit longer, showing Victor shifting into Marshall, who then joins Fritz and Cinda, who are waiting by the bushes, revealing that the true bad guys who are after the book is in fact the new neighbors. Marshall and Fritz then come over to check on Phoebe, asking if Victor's bothering her, but she then says that that's her dad, before saying that she needs to run and quickly heading back inside. Victor then turns to Marshall and Fritz and asks them what's the matter. Don't they trust him? Again, a little bit more of a scene that's there to progress the plot. We're now in the thick of the plan. Victor has used his knowledge of her powers in order to essentially tell her without telling her that he's not the bad guy. Here's who the actual bad guys are. And that, of course, gives them the opportunity to prepare and to counter the plan to get the book by the shifters. Once Phoebe makes it inside, she quickly tells Prue that it wasn't Victor but Marshall, and her premonition was wrong, and then quickly heads upstairs in order to find a spell to try to banish them, telling Prue that the neighbors are shapeshifters. Just as Cinda walks in with cookies behind Piper. Then Fritz comes from the main door, and Piper asks where Phoebe is going, and Prue lies saying that she's going to get something, telling Cinda to save her cookie, as Victor then follows Fritz in. Phoebe goes to the book that's been hidden in a closet, saying that she has no idea what she's looking for out loud, and then the pages of the book move on their own. She says that she can take a hint and memorizes the safety spell on the page it opens to. When she returns, she tells Victor he can't be there because now Victor, the real one, has also joined the others. She tells Victor that he needs to leave, and then both of the Victors start playing the "Don't trust the other one, I'm actually the real one" game. While Piper comments that last week they had no dad and now they have two. One of the Victors self-sacrifices, saying that he said he was there to protect them and they need to kill him too. Prue then tells Phoebe to begin saying the spell as the shifters start to become uncomfortable as their plan is clearly going downhill. Piper reminds Prue of the protection ring, and Prue uses her powers in order to move it close to the self-sacrificing Victor. Then Phoebe begins to say the spell, which causes Victor pain and brings him to his knees, but it doesn't kill him. Meanwhile, the shifters, obviously, are vanquished. And once the vanquish is complete, the sisters then rush over to Victor, including Prue, while Victor accepts their magic and that they can protect themselves and they don't really need him to do that for him anymore. They are no longer his little girls. Obviously, shout out, this is the first time we see the book's pages moving on their own in order to give the girls an answer when they're in a time crunch and or maybe can't find it for themselves. And we, of course, have our final fight. We've now defeated the villains, and all that's left is to wrap up the episode. So we have Prue on the phone to Andy saying that Victor is going to be there any minute, and she needs to take a rain check on their dinner, thanking him for the good advice that he gave earlier. Phoebe comments on her calling him dad now, and Prue confirms that he is dad now, pointedly commenting on Phoebe wearing her dress. But Phoebe ignores her, saying that she wants to look nice when they see him because she doesn't know when they'll see him again. Piper then wonders if Phoebe doesn't think that he's going to stick around, and Phoebe lets her know that her idealized image of him is no longer accurate. She no longer romanticizes him, but now sees him as a real person, flaws and all. Prue joins in that at least he's not a monster, which is reassuring given that they share his genes, while Piper says that it's nice he's back no matter how long it is that he stays, and that it's nice to feel like a normal family, whatever that may mean. The doorbell then rings, and Leo comes in, who Prue greets as Mr. Wyatt. Phoebe, of course, explains over the handyman, and he says to call him Leo, handing Prue an envelope that he found on the steps when he came up to ring the doorbell. Leo then comments that there aren't many houses like the manor anymore, and Piper tells him that it's a bit rough. Leo says that it isn't the manor, but the manner in which it was treated, saying he'd love to see more, and Phoebe says she'd love to show him before pushing Piper aside in order to lead him up to the attic. But then Prue gets Phoebe's attention and he goes to the attic alone. Prue then tells him that Victor isn't coming and reads out the letter that he left, holding up a VHS tape from the envelope. They then watch the video and they find that it was a family movie from when they were kids and their opening presents on Christmas morning. Obviously, after all the progress that they made with Victor, he then decides to re-abandon them just as that rift is starting to heal. Though at this point, as the previous conversation before the envelope indicated, they've now come to accept that he probably isn't sticking around and that they were grateful for whatever time that they had. So it doesn't seem like the rift is reopened in any way. Though it is kind of unkind of him to immediately re-abandon them after just starting to win over them from his previous abandonment. Obviously, the moment shown on the video, that nice little family scene, is of course really sweet. And then we get a little bit of foreshadowing of Phoebe and Piper both having a reaction to Leo's entrance. And of course, as this is a rewatch and we know the future, we are all excited that Leo has made an appearance, though it is extremely brief and we don't really get anything as far as him as a character at this point. But it's all a nice little wrap up of the episode. Now we're at the part of the video that I like best, where we are going to be ranking this episode amongst the others within the series. We rank on this channel on two ranking lists, a mostly objective ranking list, which is absent of emotion but does include the bias and judgment and so is only mostly objective. And then the personal ranking, which of course is purely based on emotions and how I personally felt about the episode overall. So we're going to start with our mostly objective rank values, and I've highlighted those that apply on the screen. So we'll start with our single episode supporting character introductions. In this case, there was 3, Cinda, Marshall, and Fritz, and that's all worth 1 point each. We then have our multi-season supporting character introduction in Victor's first appearance, which is worth 3 points. We then have our multi-season main character growth, which is of course when the sisters, and especially Prue, are able to work through their unresolved feelings and resentment to about their father, which allows them to then grow emotionally and resolve some of that hurt that they're feeling, and that is worth 4 points. However, there are some negatives. We first, of course, have the character regression of Victor. Again, just as he is being forgiven and mending the rift, he then decides to leave again without even the courtesy of a proper goodbye. And that to me is a -1 point. And then there was a weak main plot concept. Obviously, like the shifters, they were barely a threat. They were kind of pointless. The entire focus of the episode was really clearly on the subplot drama between the sisters and their father and all of that stuff. The shifters were barely there, and once they were known that they were there, they were defeated pretty much immediately and extremely easily. So that, of course, is a -4 points. And that brings us to a total of 5 points out of 10 for this objective episode. Just to call it out, because I'm sure somebody's probably wondering, Leo, technically he's seen in this episode. But I pointed out when I was giving my opinions on that scene that him here is so brief and we don't really get any sort of real indicator of his character, who he is, what his purpose in the show really is. And so to me, rather than saying this is a character introduction, I'm calling it more of a character teaser. We know how important he is to the series in the future, obviously. And so I don't consider this like an introduction. We didn't get to know anything about him other than his name and that he's a handyman, which is very, very, very shallow information. He didn't get a lot of lines, he didn't get much screen time, so I'm calling this a teaser trailer of the character rather than the character's introduction, and that's why it wasn't worth any points. So now with our mostly objective at 5 out of 10, we now can rank the episodes. And for the mostly objective ranking, it is continuing in episode order. So in first place, we have Something Wicked This Way Comes. Second, I've Got You Under My Skin. And third, Thank You for Not Morphing. However, we are not in episode order on my personal ranking list. So first I'll say why I scored it as I did. So the first off, my favorite part of the series has always been the behind the scenes subplot drama between the family members, the sisters, their relationship stuff. The supernatural fighting evil and the evil characters, the big bads of the week, that to me was always less important or entertaining than the actual family drama, slice of life type of content. So this episode being very heavy on that more family drama relationship side of things was for me a very big positive. I also like that we get to see Leo's first appearance. But again, he was there very, very, very briefly. And then, of course, the negatives is that the villains were very lackluster. They were pretty much unneeded. Victor, of course, leaves without saying goodbye, which is a negative. And then, of course, the video at the end, it was sweet to see, like that little family moment that they all gather together in the same couch to watch. So overall, I would say that this episode is quite positive, but there were some things about it that I wasn't overly enthusiastic about, and for that reason, I gave it, on the personal score, a 7 out of 10, making the ranking list. In first place, Something Wicked This Way Comes. Second, Thank You for Not Morphing. And in third place, we have I've Got You Under My Skin. And so now we're coming to the series ranking so far, where we are ranking each season against each other. And so far for the score for this season 1, we have 22 episodes, meaning a maximum score of 220 can be obtained. And on our mostly objective score, we have a 5, which brings us up to 25 out of 220. And on the personal side, we've added 7 for a total of 19 out of 220. And with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Charmed Season 1, Episode 3. Thank you for not morphing. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next video.